Well, I don't know about you, but I'm thankful for these guys and leadership team we have, and it's a great comfort to know that I can go ahead and fire Eddie if necessary. We can going just like we're going, it wouldn't be a problem. I said that in complete confidence, okay? Or hurt his feelings when he comes back. He's out of town, working on the project, and we're excited for him about that. Anxious to see how that will turn out eventually. So we'll continue to pray about that. We've been talking about worship. And Adam, I really appreciate that song. Because as you think of worship, all we're talking about is being in awe of God. That's all worship is. It's just being in awe of God. You know, we look at this world, this universe we live in, and we see a natural order. When you think about all this planets, billions and billions and billions of stars and planets out there, but they all are not crashing into each other. They're, even in our solar system, everything is on target and operating on a natural order. And you have the seasons. Talking with Richard coming in, we were talking about a lovely day and the heat, like cooler weather and those kind of things. And it reminds us that, the natural order of things, there will be seasons that come. Winter, spring, summer, and fall. And everything you look at, the animals reproduce after their kind, and everything that we see has a natural order. Except man. We are the wild card in this whole equation. Heard a story about a guy who was desperately looking for a job, been out of work for a while, and he saw an ad in the newspaper that they were advertising for someone to come work at the zoo, local zoo. So he said, well, I'll try anything. I got to work. Went down to the zoo and applied for the job, and the guy was talking to him there at the zoo, and he said, now listen, you have to keep this in confidence, but what we need you to do is we've got a monkey suit. We need to dress you up like a monkey. If something happened, and our monkeys are sick, and so you've got to be a monkey. So the guy said, well, I need a job. Where's the suit? He said, okay. So they gave him an orientation on how to eat bananas and how to swing from the little trees and stuff they had there. And so next day he's eating bananas and swinging from the trees. And as he was swinging from one of the trees, he accidentally fell over into the lion's compound. And of course, being a good monkey, he jumps up and he starts screaming, help, help, get me out of here, help, help, get me out of here. And the lion came over and he said, listen, bud, if you don't hush, we're both going to get fired. Now, the problem with that story is that in the natural order, monkeys should be monkeys, and lions should be lions. But man interjects himself into all this that God has created. And the amazing thing is, when you understand that God has made, in some sense, concession for us in this. Concession basically by not completely destroying us because of our intervention in His creation and marring that creation, introducing disobedience into that creation, and man going his own way in that creation and deciding he's going to be what he wants to be and do what he wants to do. And so we understand that that's the realm in which we operate in this natural order, in this creation. And God is present in all of this, and He's always at work trying to get our attention. He's always at work revealing Himself to us, and that's why I said at the outset of this that God continues to do that, and He's going to reveal Himself to us this morning and as individuals, corporately. And He's going to say things to us. He's going to try and get our attention. He's going to try and get us on the right frequency so that we can see Him, so that we can hear Him. And so that's what is happening in the background. And then when you get to Isaiah chapter 6, And you can go ahead and turn there, Isaiah chapter 6. As we have been talking about worship, and because of our nature, because we have marred the natural order of things, we can have a difficult time coming into the presence of this awesome, powerful, incredible God and giving Him the work that He's due. And by the way, that also includes laying down our lives. There is this exchange that is expected in this transaction, that He gives His life for our life, and we give up His life for His life in us. That's the way this thing works. But that's also where the struggle always begins, and that's where the struggle always ends in mine and your life. That God's always trying to get our attention. God's always trying to pull us into Himself. He's always trying to help us to see Him and experience Him and respond to Him. And our problem is we get off frequency a little bit. You know, that radio station thing. Well, you kids don't understand this. It used to have dials on it. And you had to turn it just right and kind of make different right moves to make it, and suddenly you would just get that. But we're always offset just a little bit in this thing. And our problem is trying to stay on frequency, trying to stay plugged in, trying to stay focused. And everything that God desires hinges on this fact. And that fact is worship. Missions exist because worship does not exist. And when worship completely exists, missions will not exist anymore. Worship is the fire. It is the fuel that runs our hearts, our lives, and all that God wants to produce in and through us. That only comes out of a heart of worship. It only comes out of staying close to God, of seeing Him, of being in awe of Him, of following Him. And we've been talking about that, and we've looked at the first 4 verses a couple of weeks ago. And I won't go back through the entire thing right now, but Isaiah is just a guy. Isaiah is just a guy who has a vision. God reveals Himself to him. And just like God reveals Himself to him, God reveals Himself to us. And at that moment in time, there is a decision that you and I make. Just like the decision that Isaiah had to make. What am I going to leave here with? Who am I going to be when I walk out of this door? Who is Isaiah going to be after this encounter with this incredible holy God, this all-powerful, all-knowing, all-able God? What will his life look like after that? That's the wild card. Because you see, Isaiah could have walked away from this and said, "Well, that was nice. I feel good about that. That was a warm, fuzzy feeling, and boy, one of these days, God will show back up, and I'll get the same thing will happen down the road someplace." But God doesn't come and reveal Himself to us just to make us feel good. God doesn't go to all the trouble that He's gone. God has not gone to the trouble of sacrificing His Son on a bloody cross so that we can just feel good about ourselves and come in and have a good time. Now, I like those things. I'm not against those things. But we've got to understand there's a whole lot more to this thing than just coming and saying, "Boy, I hope worship is good today. I hope they sing my song today, or a song, or the song, or the perfect song today." Boy, I sure hope that preacher down there actually comes up with a good sermon today. I almost passed out last week. Yeah, and that, we forget what this involves. We forget the focus of this thing. It somehow suddenly becomes about us. And we lose the reality. We lose the presence and the power of this Creator God who has gone to great lengths to redeem us. But not only to redeem us, to call us to Himself and to send us out guarding His name and His glory and presenting who He is to a lost world so that they can also experience Him, so that they can also come into this kingdom, this presence, joy forevermore. And so that's what's taking place here in the first 4 verses of Isaiah. And so now the vision has been cast. Isaiah is caught up in the middle of it, and he experiences and sees all these things. What should the result be of that encounter? Should it be go home and live my life? Should it be go ahead and pick up my life again? Should my journey change at all? Should my faith be different? Or do we just say, boy, that was nice. Good job, God. But I've got some things to do. I'll catch you next week. Please be back. What should the effects of worship be? Well, I think the next several verses remind us of that. One of those effects that immediately we understood is Isaiah here in chapter 5 reminds us of, after he's seen all this. So I said, woe is me, for I am undone. Mine eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. The presence of God should produce a deep, deep conviction in us. A deep conviction of who we are versus who He is. It should produce an insight into my life. It should produce an insight into your life. When we encounter this holy God, there should be a conviction that overwhelms us and says that we're not what we need to be. And our problem is most of the time that we're comparing ourselves to each other instead of this holy God who appears to us. And so, if I'm not quite as bad as you are, then I must be okay. Or you're not quite as bad as He is, and you're all right. You're going to be all right. This is going to work out. But Isaiah had a correct vision. He had a correct focus. He looked at this God. He was in awe of this God. He realized that he had been in the presence of power and holiness. And standing in that reflection caused him deep conviction. Woe is me, for I am undone. We don't get undone too much anymore, folks. There's not a whole lot that undoes us. We have gotten so used to this world around us, and we have been so mesmerized, we have been so pulled into it, that we start looking like it, and acting like it, and smelling like it, and producing the things that it produces. They call him Kadosh. He is the other. He is the other. He is not like us. And when we experience His presence, it should cause us to take inventory of ourselves. It should create a conviction in my life and in your life about who I am and how I operate. And here's the deal with this. Martha and Mary. Jesus has come to town, Bethany. They hear about it. Jesus is near. Mary takes off. She wants to see Jesus. Martha's back at the house. She's working hard. She's preparing dinner. She's thinking about Jesus. She's excited. But what does Jesus say about that? He doesn't rebuke her, but he just simply reminds her. And I'm going to paraphrase maybe what took place in the background, okay? Martha comes and, Jesus, why don't you tell Mary to come help me out? We're trying to get this dinner ready. We've got some things to do. And Jesus, I could just imagine him. He's not putting his arm around her and he's saying, Martha, come here. Listen, you can get caught up in the doings. But I want you to, but you see, Mary has chosen the good thing because Mary has identified that I'm in the house, that I'm present. And you see, she has identified at this moment in time what the priority is. Because you see it, when Jesus is in the house, he should be the focus. He should be the priority. He should be the one that nothing else matters. And so what we can have is that it may not be bad stuff. But God wants us to be. He wants us to be close to Him. He wants us to be what He has created us to be. His people. His heart. His love. And we get so much of the world caught up in that it sucks the life out of us, that it takes our joy away. And all I'm saying this morning is that when Jesus shows up, when worship takes place, that it should cause us to have some kind of deep conviction about my life and your life. It should cause us to take a look at it, an inventory, and not base it on anything else anybody's doing or anything that I've done, good or bad. But how does this shape up with what I'm seeing, with who I'm experiencing, with what He's saying? And you see, that changes everything. And it should change everything. It should make us different. There should be a fresh conviction in our life, a fresh attitude, a fresh heart, a fresh direction in this thing, in this journey of faith that God's called us to. And so, woe is me, I am undone, because I have seen Him, and now I have something, that I have a North Star, I have a compass, I have a focus of what all this really means, of what this is really about. And it should change my heart and my life. So there was this deep conviction, but Isaiah goes on and he says, not only is he undone, but he says, I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. And so there not only should be this deep conviction that takes place when we worship, but there also should be this heartfelt, heart-rending confession that takes place. We take this inventory in our lives and we realize how short we come. On our best day, our good deeds are as filthy rags. What can we do? What can we do? We're always trying to do. And God's always trying to get us tuned in and say, I want you to be. I want you to be cognizant. I want you to experience. I want you to know me. I want you to draw. I want you to be everything. This complete person that I desire you to be. And out of that being, the doing will come. Get down in a couple of verses here. That'll take place. But you see, it's the worship. It's the awe. It's His presence. And that is the only thing that will put us on a path. It's the only thing that will help us to focus. It's the only thing that will help us to fully understand as we live these lives of faith that God's called us to what this means. Because you see, we want to get into the do's and the don'ts. We want to get out our scale and start do a balancing act in this thing. Have you ever come up short on that? Have you ever come up empty on that? Every time. Every time. And when we live that life, that religiosity, that legalism, now I got to remember everything I'm supposed to do, and I got to remember everything I'm not supposed to do. That's called legalism. That's called a dead-end street, and it will kill you. It will rob every joy out of the depths of your heart. And when you get up tomorrow morning, you will not say, it's a new day. And His mercies are new every day. Because all you're concentrating on is, now, what do I got to do today? What do I have to, what performance level do I have to attain today? I didn't quite make it yesterday, but silver medal day yesterday, bronze, but today I'm going for the gold. And then the evening comes, and maybe we didn't even make the bronze today. We're the guy laying on the track. We're the guys who were disqualified because they couldn't pass the baton right. Listen, we never get it right in that sense of comparing to this incredible God who calls us to Himself. That's why we just need to draw near to Him. That's why there's this thing of there has to be a conviction at work in our hearts. And only because we've drawn near to Him. And then there should be this confession. This heartfelt God, I don't always get it right. I don't get it right. That's just, listen, He's not surprised by that. Because you see, the Word tells us that He knows us. He knows that the heart is deceitfully wicked above all things. He knows every fine point and print of mine in your life. But an amazing thing happens as we are convicted about that, as we make confession of that God shows up and He says, listen, but I'm going to take care of that too. And He says, Isaiah continues on in verse 6, then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a live coal, which he had taken with the tongs from the altar, and he touched my mouth with it and said, behold, this has touched your lips, your iniquity is taken away, and your sin is purged. Folks, it doesn't get any better than that. You have this your iniquity, your sin, it's taken away. I'm removing it. It's not I'm glossing over it. It's not that I'm going to smear a little bit of cleanser on it. It's not that I'm going to put a little Clorox on it and hope it gets as white as we want it. But He says, I'm taking it away from you. I'm removing it. If you come to me in your conviction, your confession, I'm going to clean you up. I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to remove it. And then He says, not only is it taken away, but He says, your sin is purged. He says, I have dealt with it, and I have put it away. I have destroyed it. I have purged it from you. It doesn't exist anymore. Are you seeing the progression that's taking place? You see how this works in our lives? And we can't skip these things. And it always goes back to worship. It always goes back to Him. You always come back to that place. You don't come back here on this end of it, but you come back to God. That's why the Lord's Prayer says, hallowed be Thy name, Thy kingdom come. Your will be done on earth. You make that connection of who He is and the incredible God that He is, and then you can get into this confession part of this thing. It never works the other way. Because we will never confess our sins ultimately. We might confess our favorite ones. But it's only through deep conviction of standing in His presence that we realize what our sins are and the depth of our sin. Because you see, we get so used to it that it bothers Him. We get so used to it that conviction is very dim in mine and your life. And God has to come and He has to show up in His splendor, His glory. And when that happens, when the light is turned on, listen, the dust is revealed. You ever been in a room and it, just like this room, if we could cut on floodlights in here, you know what we'd see? Particles, places full of dust. Wish I hadn't said that. But we don't see it. Because the real light, the bright light, the perfect light has not been turned on. But when God's presence comes, listen, every iniquity, every fault, every failure, every sin is glaring. To be forgiven, we have to come to that place. Most of the time, we don't want to face our sin. We want to cover it up. We want to live with it. We want to put it aside. But the good news is there's complete cleansing. Complete cleansing. God will forgive you. I heard the song on the radio this morning. Phyllis Craig and Dean. Some of you should know it. But he ran to me. Ran to me, put his head on my chest, held me in his arms, said he forgave me. You know his prodigal son story? He living in a pig pen, squandered his living, starving, remembered his dad. Not worthy to be his son anymore, but maybe I could just be his servant. But here comes Dad, wide open. Boy's still down the highway. Dad doesn't wait. He wants to get to his son. Listen, God forgives. God heals. God corrects. God establishes. He plants our feet afresh. And His mercy becomes new every day. What should happen out of that context? Of this conviction, of this cleansing? What's the next step in that? Also, I heard a voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" And then I said, "Here am I, send me. Here am I, send me." Isaiah's minding his own business. God shows up. But you see, God's got a plan and purpose for Isaiah's life. And God knows that will never work, that Isaiah will not come on board with that unless all this takes place first. So God reveals Himself and then who He is. You may not have been carried into the third heaven, and you may not have seen His throne and His temple, and you may not have seen His glory robe fill the temple, and you may not have seen the Shekinah glory of the smoke in that place. But God has revealed Himself to you just as sure and just as real. Because through the gift of His Son, God said, "I love you. And I want you to see me, I want you to know me, I want you to hear me, and I want you to experience me." And that's why He came. And we can have the same revelation that Isaiah has had in mine and your life. Because God's faithful. Because He still speaks. Because He still reveals Himself to us. And God's purpose in all that is to make us whole and full of joy and productive. But it's also that we can take His glory and we can reveal it to the nations. We can reveal it to our family and our friends and associates. And we will never say, let the nations rejoice, until we say, I rejoice in the Lord my God. It'll never happen. I close with this. It was sometime last year, a book came out written by one of our international missionaries, Nate Ripken. It was called The Insanity of God. Oh man, that almost sounds blasphemous. I'm going to read this. I got the book and read it. And next Tuesday at 7 o'clock at the Regal Cinemas on the right end of Woodruff Road, not the wrong end of Woodruff Road, they have produced a movie about this. The trailer for that movie, The Insanity of God, when it comes on, says that 90% of the church will never, ever share their faith. They'll be born in the church, they'll live in the church, and they'll die in the church. And 90% will never speak His name as a witness to anyone else. And the question that is asked in all this, and they went to Somalia, and they in that process of going to a war-torn country and then seeing the evil and the darkness that took place there, and man's inhumanity to man, and the torture and the death in many ways that took place. And while they were in that setting, their teenage son died. And they share that they had never thought that things could be so dark as those days were. And the question they came out of there with is this: after seeing all the suffering they went through, after all the evil, man's inhumanity to man, that they said, we had to ask ourselves, is Jesus worth it? Is Jesus worth it? Am I wasting my time? Will evil win? It appears that it's winning now. It seems to have its heyday, its full course, whatever it wants to accomplish. And that began a life journey for them of trying to figure out this dark world and all that is taking place, and all the heartbreak and hurt of this world. But I'm glad to report it. If you want to get the full report, you need to go support and see the movie next Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. One show, and you got one chance at it. Is Jesus working? We will never believe that He is worth it until we stand in His presence. Until we see Him as He is. Until we experience Him the way He wants to be. Experience Him. Now, I stand up here Sunday after Sunday, and I shed these tears because I know what I said. And I know how far we have fallen. And I fully understand what God wants. And I don't see us anywhere near that place. And I don't know what to do about it, except to live Him. And I pray that And we will respond to Him in a right and correct faith way. And leave these lives that we try and live behind. And follow Him. Here's your invitation. You can go ahead and stand. If you are tired of the life you're living, and you know what it is, you may not be, that's great. But if anything that I've said in this service this morning has brought conviction to your life, do something about it. Deal with it. You can deal with it right where you are. I'm okay with that. I'm not about some big show and going out and saying, well, I had 50 people at the altar this week. This thing is far deeper than that. But it's about your relationship with a holy God who has done everything He can do to redeem you and to bring you into His presence and to call you out of this world into His kingdom and to follow Him. Do you know if you're doing that? I know when I'm doing that, when I'm not. I know what I need. Do you know what you need to do this morning? This altar's open. Those pews are open. You may need to grab somebody and go out the door and get in your car and pray together. Whatever you need to do business with God this morning. Don't keep running through this motion of church and this cycle of religion and I want to do better this week. What God wants us to do is to stand in His presence. Are you standing in His presence? Can you do that? Can you experience Him in your life? Listen, folks, you can. If you're not. If you are, you might need to help me or somebody else. But the invitation is, see Him. Draw near to Him, that He can draw near to you this morning. Bow your heads and close your eyes. And maybe this morning that you don't have a relationship with Christ. I'm not asking if you've said some kind of magic formula or how religious you are or whatever you have done to try and get to God. There's only one way to Him. That's confession.